Welcome back and welcome back to the Horror Master YouTube channel. Welcome back to episode number 13, the lucky or unlucky number 13 of the controversial album cover series. And like I mentioned before, guys, thank you guys so much for watching all the videos I've done so far. And like I mentioned before, I'm still going through the bottom of the barrel to find albums to talk to you guys every week. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be so many albums that I've yet to discover that I need to talk about eventually in the future. Probably move on to more live albums covers eventually in the future, but you know, that's in the future. But let's talk about episode 13. And on this episode, we're gonna talk about an album that I originally wanted to do as one of the first episodes in the series. But as the time went on, more albums just came up, pop more and more. So it's better late than never. So let's get into this episode. We're going to talk about the self-titled debut by Rage Against the Machine, titled Rage Against the Machine, released on November 3rd, 1992 on Epic Records. So Rage Against the Machine is a band that influences a lot of rap, funk, metal, influence into their sound and political views into their entire discography. Sort of like System of a Down, but not really System of a Down. They're more like more Americanized, so they talk about politics, religion. You mention everything that's called political and religious. They talk about it into their lyrics. And of course, with this album, it's most notable because of the song "Killing in the Name of," which has been an anthem for the longest time. Also with songs like Boom Track, Bullet in the Head, Freedom, Wake Up, Know Your Enemy, of course, with Mary Dean Skinner from Tool making a appearance in the album. But, you know, great songs overall. But let's talk about the album cover and why I consider this controversial. So the album cover depicts a picture. So this picture was taken, if I have my notes around here, was taken around 1963 by a gentleman called Malcolm Brown. And this illustration depicts the self-cremation, immolation, or self-protest of a monk named, and I apologize for my Vietnamese. I'm not really good Vietnamese, but I see if I can get the proper pronunciation of this monk. And the name of the monk is called Seke Quodon Doka. Again, I apologize for my Vietnamese. I'm not fluent in Vietnamese, just what I can actually understand. This was of that famous monk in 1963. Of course, this picture has been around since that long, and the reason this picture became so iconic is because I have to take you back to 1963 in Vietnam. Of course, this was after Vietnam, the Vietnam War. Of course, no, this was this during the Vietnam War? Actually, no. This was before the Vietnam War. I mean, yeah, this is before the Vietnam War. Kennedy was still under his presidency, and of course, at the time they had a president. And again, I apologize for my pronunciation. Called Ngo Dinh. Again, I apologize for my pronunciation. Who was pretty much his administration was oppressing the Buddhist religion, which the majority of Vietnamese people are of the Buddhist religion. So this monk, in other words, to kind of protest against his president, did one of the craziest things that you could ever think of. He didn't go up on a rally. He didn't write a note. Nope. He pretty much sat on the ground, put himself some gasoline, and just pretty much burned himself to death, leaving an impact on not just the Vietnamese people, the president, the country, and the entire world. And again, it's amazing that the photographer named Malcolm Brown took this iconic picture and has spawned so much stuff and so many imitations, to the point that in 1963, he was awarded the World Press Photo of the Year award. And John F. Kennedy actually, because of those actions, went to Vietnam. We're talking to the Vietnam government about trying to, you know, make some relations between the U.S. and Vietnam. Of course, that unfortunately never happened because later on we got the Vietnam War and so on and so forth. But, you know, this iconic album cover, like I mentioned before, when the band decided to release it in 1992, when, again, Vietnam was still being under, was Vietnam under a, sort of a dictatorship, still kind of, sort of under dictatorship. So, and like I mentioned before, Rage Against the Machine is a band that is not afraid to talk about political views, so they decided to release this at the album cover. And for a lot of fans who aren't really known with Vietnamese history, or American history or world history, they were offended that this album cover kind of it was an offensive to the Vietnam people, and of course Vietnam. Some Vietnamese fans, some Vietnamese people were actually, they were like, yeah, this is what happened. This is when a man of peace decides to go to the full lengths and burns himself to death to make a point to the Vietnamese government and the Vietnamese, his Vietnamese people about his religious views, which, like I mentioned before, nothing against any kind of religion. Whatever you preach, it's on their own hood. But that takes a lot of balls for a monk, like I mentioned before, a man of peace, decides to burn himself. Literally, I'm just imagining him, what was going through his mind when he decided to, pour the gas on himself and light the lighter and just throw himself at him. And just imagine during that pain and agony of his flesh coming off his body, all that pain, he was keeping in mind that he was making a point to his government and to his religion and to his people that this will not be what it will be in the future. And then, of course, like I mentioned before, eventually Vietnam, sorta, as the years went by, kind of became more friendly. That's a perfect way I can say friendly with the religious views. And like I mentioned before, I'm not a Vietnamese person. Maybe someone who's from Vietnam or knows more about Vietnam can elaborate me about what the current state of Vietnam is right now, or would they like to know about it, so I can make this video a bit more informative. But when it was released in 1992, like I mentioned before, a lot of Vietnamese people who were of Vietnamese descent in America, some of them took offense to it because they thought it was a blasphemy that this picture was illustrated against Vietnamese people. But in reality, when they listen to the album and the lyrics, it makes a statement to the government, any kind of government in the world. It makes a statement that we're not going to be part of the government, that we are not going to fall by the rules of the government, that there's some rules that the government makes out of their ass and tries to implement on their people. So whenever a protest doesn't go their way, this monk, this man of peace takes the ultimate sacrifice to make a statement. And like I mentioned before, it has made a huge statement to the impact that, of course, like I mentioned before, this photo was released in 1963, and we're still talking about it 60 years later. And the album cover, of course, with the Rage Against the Machine, made it more notable to people who weren't even born during this event, and will eventually be researched and upon and made papers about it, videos about it, like I mentioned before. That's why I'm making this video. And of course, like I mentioned before, the band didn't give two shits about what the people thought, but the message that they were trying to say was that, sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures if you want change, not only in your life, in the government, in religion, or whatever you're protesting. And this man of peace made the ultimate sacrifice to burn himself to death, and that impact kind of spawned a way of so many people kind of making the same thing in America and in any other countries. Of course, with the black movement in the 60s, of course, the Civil Rights Act movement of 64 and 65, even though they didn't go to those many drastic measures, they almost did. But of course, that made a statement that, if you believe in something that you're passionate about, something you believe in, it's worth dying for. And a lot of people, when they saw the album cover, kind of didn't see that message. It took them a while to get that message through their heads. When I first saw the album cover, I kind of already knew the history of this Buddhist and what he was standing for, so right away it didn't offend me or gave me any uncomfortableness. But I mentioned before, just burning himself to death was something extreme. but the statement was made through, and I hope that some people in the future, when they see this album cover, don't automatically think that it's offensive to Vietnamese people or their history, but it's a statement that, you know, like I mentioned before, if you believe in something you're passionate, something you love, something you want, sometimes you're gonna make sacrifices, and like I mentioned before, some of them can be the ultimate sacrifice, and hopefully, you know, this doesn't happen again in the future. Then again, I don't know what's the state of mind in some other countries. Maybe they've done something more extreme that I'm not aware of or whatever. But, you know, this album cover will ever test the test of time, and this photographic picture will forever be immortal, has already been immortalized, and will be forever be recognized and forever be talked about long before we're all dead and gone, to the point that the day that the world dies, it will just be three cockroaches and fucking Kid Richard just talk about this fucking photo. Regardless, this is why I consider this a very controversial album cover, but the statement kind of, you know, makes the point of the album cover. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this new video. Like I mentioned before, I'm bringing you guys more videos, hopefully. So I'm gonna bring you a CD collection update probably next couple of weeks. I'm gonna start to do my next ranking. I haven't done a ranking in a while, and I'm gonna do it on Cattle Decapitation, since I've been listening to Cattle Decapitation this past couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that video. And let's see what the future holds, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, everyone, and until next time, stay metal.